Do I need to draft today? Everyone knows my topic. Li Keqiang passed away. It's really a very surprising news. Li Keqiang is only 68 years old this year. It seems rather bizarre too, as the highest leader in China. He just retired in March, but now he's died of heart disease, which is really quite odd. The acceptable medical system of the Chinese Communist Party. For a senior national official, whether in office or retired, the medical security level is very high. A medical team accompanies us 24/7, and as ordinary people, we know that even if a heart attack happens, there is a golden rescue time of a few minutes. Mainly a defibrillator is nearby and a medical team will promptly follow up. No issues should arise. The reason heart disease is threatening is because for ordinary people, if we have a heart attack, by the time the ambulance arrives or when taken to the hospital, you are basically already gone. The golden few minutes for rescuing myocardial infarction, but for these senior officials of the Chinese Communist Party, the threat of this heart disease is not particularly great because they have a very comprehensive medical security system. The last Chinese Communist Party official to die of heart disease was Hu Yaobang, who passed away in 1989. Hu Yaobang died at 7 in the morning, but at that time, the level of medical care was not particularly high. In recent years, medical security in the Chinese Communist Party has made rapid progress, so it's difficult to see senior officials of the party die of heart disease. Everyone knows Jiang Zemin, he lived to be over 90 years old. He had 2 heart attacks in the meantime, but he was rescued both times and is fine. So you think, as a senior national official, if Li Keqiang, 68, dies of a heart attack, it does sound very unexpected. Moreover, the news today first emerged around 9 o'clock, when domestic news apps began to break the story. Someone informed me right away saying, "Wang sir, hurry and look, Li Keqiang has passed away." But when I opened it to see, the news had already been deleted. It was reposted about 4 or 5 minutes later, but there was something odd about the news when it was republished. In the past, news like the death of party and state leaders was first released by Xinhua news agency and then forwarded by other news platforms. This time it's different. The news this time seemed to be released in a hurry. The obituary even mentioned that this information will be released later. This suggests that the news was released very hastily, without enough time to release an obituary. Moreover, another point is that other news platforms released the news together, and from what I see, it seems that the news client of the central television released it even earlier. Internal system of the Communist Party of China. There may also be some power struggles and competition for discourse power between CCTV and Xinhua news agency. In summary, this news immediately hit the headlines of major news outlets around the world today during the process of the news release. Just state that Li Keqiang is resting in Shanghai, then he suffered a heart attack, but the exact cause and process remain undisclosed. Everyone knows that the Chinese Communist Party treats the health information of their internal party and state leaders as state secrets and never discloses them. However, information quickly surfaced online, including messages from some medical community friends in Shanghai, piecing together the reason why Li Keqiang passed away. Li Keqiang was staying at the East Suburb Guest House in Shanghai. As many know, there are 2 state guest houses in Shanghai. One is the West Suburb Guest House, and the other is the East Suburb Guest House. The West Suburb Guest House was built earlier, and historically, figures like Mao Zedong, Zhou Enlai, and Jiang Zemin preferred staying there when visiting Shanghai. The West Suburb Guest House is quite beautiful, with vast green spaces, a lake, and many Western-style villas and small buildings scattered about. Later on, the East Suburb Guest House was constructed. Situated in Pudong, its design bears a resemblance to the West Suburb Guest House, boasting a large green area, a lake, and a forest. However, it features a more modernized hotel. Now, both the East Suburb Hotel and the West Suburb Hotel are open to the public, but there is an area here specifically for the residence of party and state leaders. Li Keqiang lives in the Dongjiao Hotel, which is a specific area for national residents. This area is not typically open to the public. As per a knowledgeable person in Shanghai, Li Keqiang suffered a sudden heart attack while swimming yesterday morning. Having a heart attack while swimming is the riskiest, but why? Well, when you're swimming in a pool and suddenly have a heart attack, the folks nearby might not even realize it. By the time they do and fish you out of the water, precious time might have already been lost. There's another, even deadlier point. When you have a heart attack while swimming, you're likely to experience drowning because you're in the water and your heart suddenly stops beating. Currently, you can't swim or control autonomous breathing, making it easy to choke on water and experience drowning. So after Li Keqiang suddenly had a heart attack at the pool, he was rushed to a hospital named Dawn Hospital near the Dongjiao State Guest Hotel. Dawn Hospital is affiliated with the Shanghai University of Traditional Chinese Medicine, and it's fair to say that it doesn't rank very high in terms of overall medical standards in Shanghai because of the association with traditional Chinese medicine, which is often considered a scam. Though there are good Chinese medicine unis now, they teach both Western and Chinese medicine, level not as good as modern Western medicine. In Shanghai, the medical programs at Fudan University and West China Medical University are pretty top-notch, among others. These hospitals are highly regarded, but perhaps due to an emergency situation at the time, the nearest one was Shuguang Hospital. So Li Keqiang was taken to this hospital. After, doctors from new internal med and surgery depths of major hospitals in Shanghai were all summoned to ER of Shuguang Hospital. Yesterday in Shanghai, High Price began to close road. Then, when taken to the Dawn Hospital Emergency Center, the entire vicinity of Dawn Hospital was completely cordoned off by police cars. But despite over 10 hours of rescue efforts, they couldn't be saved. Li Keqiang died unexpectedly, and Li Keqiang is referred to as a member of the Tuan faction in China's political arena. The so-called Tuan refers to the Communist Youth League. The Communist Party of China's system, besides the party, there are two affiliated organizations. There's a group called the Communist Youth League and another called the Young Pioneers. They're divided by age. The Young Pioneers is a group that children join in primary school. In junior high school, they become young people and join the Communist Youth League. Then, once you come of age, step into society, and start working, you can actively seek to join the Chinese Communist Party. So essentially, the previous two organizations are preparatory bodies for the CCP, meaning before you get into the organizational system of the CCP. First, you join the Youth League, then the Young Pioneers, getting some initial training and exposure to the most basic theories of the CCP. After reform, a unique power division formed the Communist Youth League and the Communist Party of China. In theory, it's a prep organization, so it shouldn't have a large influence. However, after the end of the Cultural Revolution, a problem emerged. During the revolution, Mao persecuted senior party officials. So, following the Cultural Revolution, these high-ranking officials made a comeback, because they too needed to implement policies and provide some sort of compensation to people. However, this brought about a problem concerning the demographic within the decision-making bodies of the CCP, from the central to local levels. There was a noticeable aging population, with most of the individuals being in their 70s or 80s attending these meetings. Deng Xiaoping felt that there was a problem, so he proposed to rejuvenate the cadres. The term youthification of the cadre refers to you folks, even though old Mao persecuted you. But you can't just stand in this position and not budge, because if you do, the young folks can't move up. If this country is governed by old men, can it have a future? Back then, to solve this issue, Deng Xiaoping even specifically set up an advisory committee. What it meant was, get you guys into the central committee where your benefits remain unchanged. You can even attend meetings and voice your opinions, but step aside and give the positions to the young folks. When handing over to the younger generation, they face a problem. During the Cultural Revolution, the CCP did not cultivate successors. So when he was building his cadre team, there was a gap. So it's not easy to find young people at this time. The Communist Youth League naturally joins the cause. Due to the nature of the Communist Youth League as an organization, its executives are necessitated to be very young. This fact played a part in Hu Yaobang being able to serve as general secretary at the time. Following Hu Yaobang, individuals like Hu Jintao, Li Keqiang, and Wang all emerged from the league as executives.
人在干，天在看，看来是苍天有眼啊！看着我们国办同志这些年来辛辛苦苦、扎扎实实做出的特殊的奉献，应该给你们奖赏。你看，这个风已经呼风了。
Cadres in this faction have several characteristics, the first being their youth. Because the Central Committee of the Communist Youth League is led by a ministerial-level official, but its vertical management system enables a particularly fast process of cadre promotion. After the CPC implemented the reform and opening up policy, there was an objective criterion in cadre selection, which was age. What age to reach department level? What age to reach bureau level? After passing age stage, no hope of promotion remains? Currently, the group cadre has an unmatched advantage. First off, the cadre within the Tuan faction tend to be on the younger side, that's one. Second, these faction members generally don't share the characteristic of coming from red families. Everyone knows the Communist Party is also a massive interest group, and their own second and third generations of Reds are gradually gaining power. After all, this is an interest relationship where buildings get the moon first by getting water. For instance, currently within the high-ranking officials of the Chinese Communist Party, many come from red families. Xi Jinping is a notable example, with his father being Xi Zhongxun. Bo Xilai too, his father hailed from a red family. I've always seen the Communist Party akin to the military nobility group when the Han dynasty was just established. Because this realm was fought for collectively, it's like our children are slowly coming to share in this power structure, which is a distinctive characteristic. However, faction cadres are generally from poor families. The third and crucial feature, group cadres tend to have more open-minded thinking, they are receptive to reform and opening up, and generally accept Western universal values. From Hu Yaobang to Hu Jintao to Li Keqiang and on to Wang, these Communist Youth League officials, this is a common characteristic among Communist Youth League officials. Although the cadres of the faction may have a lack of grassroots work experience and their abilities may not be particularly strong, their thinking is indeed relatively open-minded.
中国是一个人口众多的发展中国家，我们人均年收入的平均水平是3万元人民币，但是有6亿人每个月的收入也就是1000元，1000元，在一个中等城市可能租房都困难。现在又碰到疫情，疫情后啊，可以说民生危要。
Li Keqiang from Anhui Province, with college entrance exam resumption, admitted to Peking University Law Department. Peking University and Tsinghua University are China's top universities. Student union presidents have privilege, taking turns as national youth chairman. During Li Keqiang's time at Peking University, he ran for the position of student union president and became the national youth chairman. CPC's Central Committee established a relation. After graduation, he briefly served as Youth League Committee Secretary at PKU for 2 YRs, then joined CYL's Central Committee. After this, it began to rise rapidly. At 43, upon arriving in Henan, he was already the provincial governor and was nicknamed the baby governor. Becoming a provincial governor at 43 is not easy. Li Keqiang groomed as crown prince from an early age. Think about it, it should be said. Everyone thinks he is the future #1 person. So he later served as the governor of Henan province, then moved on to Liaoning province to become the secretary of the provincial party committee, and eventually landed a spot at the central government as the highest-ranking vice premier, before finally becoming the premier of the state council. There was a twist in the tale, though, when Xi Jinping emerged on the scene halfway through. So Xi Jinping and Li Keqiang were locked in a rivalry during that period, vying for the top spot. In the end, Li Keqiang had to settle for less, failing to secure the position of the General Secretary of the Communist Party and only making it to the Premier of the State Council. Now, how should we evaluate Li Keqiang's 10-year tenure as Premier, especially since he passed away today? Let's take a moment to reflect on Li Keqiang's life and his most significant period in office as Premier over the last decade, and discuss what he accomplished. I've done a show in the past stating that Li Keqiang has been one of the least noticeable premiers among China's history of premiers. Why so? It's largely due to the power struggle he had with Xi Jinping at the time, as Xi personally didn't trust him and never really considered him one of his own. So Li Keqiang can exert his abilities. Such a stage is actually very limited. Everyone can imagine that in the past, those few prime ministers, Zhu Rongji's speech was actually very low-key, including Li Peng. Yet, when Li Keqiang became premier, there was actually no voice. However, Li Keqiang himself, does he really want to do it? He definitely wants to do it. When Li Keqiang was premier in 2013, he once brought up a phrase saying, "Reform and opening up is China's biggest dividend." I think this phrase very much embodies Li Keqiang's characteristic, which is to say, Li Keqiang still firmly hopes that China can implement the policy of reform and opening up. Later, a place used this sentence to compile a book, reform and opening up is China's biggest dividend, bringing together Li Keqiang's thoughts and speeches at that time. When Li Keqiang became premier, it was proposed to name it the Li Keqiang School of Economics. As he was the only premier in China with an economics PhD, everyone has high hopes for him. So what was the backdrop of the reform and opening up proposed by Li Keqiang at the time, which is seen as China's biggest dividend? The backdrop is actually the gradual disappearance of China's demographic dividend. Many know that there are factors behind China's reform and opening up. The demographic dividend, industrial transfer of countries like Japan and Taiwan, and China's WTO accession have created economic prosperity in China's 40 years of reform and opening up. But Li Keqiang questioned if China can still develop after the demographic dividend. You should know whether it's the demographic dividend or the foreign trade dividend. All these came about after the economic reform. Before that, the cost of labor was even cheaper. So why didn't it translate into economic growth? This shows that China's biggest dividend wasn't actually the demographic one. What was it? It was the dividend brought about by the economic reform. It's because of systemic innovation, creating a continuous stream of dividends. That's what propelled China's economy into a period of rapid growth, which I think is a very sensible analysis. Back in the Mao era, as labor is cheap, but development has not occurred despite the disappearing demographic dividend. Planned economy hampers creativity, meaningless to work hard, impossible for diligence to translate into wealth in a system that stifles innovation. After the reform, the CCP prioritized economic construction. However, the era of Li Keqiang faced a challenge, which is that the initial 30 years of reform and opening up were essentially developed through a combination of decentralization and concessions, capitalizing on a demographic dividend. Yet the act of decentralization and making concessions inherently has what's called a release period. Once what can be released is nearly exhausted, it's essentially fully released. Plus, following this phase of economic takeoff, as we all know, there comes the so-called middle income trap, faced by many. If your industry can't be upgraded and you can't overcome such a bottleneck, you may end up in a situation like Latin American nations. Your economic growth remains stagnant between $5,000 and $8,000. Li Keqiang proposed reform and opening up as China's biggest dividend must avoid China falling into the Latin American trap. The topic he talked about here is actually the upgrading of China's industrialization. The so-called industrial upgrading refers to the gradual transition from a simple platform developed by labor-intensive industries to an information-based and globalized fast lane of the new Chinese economy. Inside, this was a goal proposed by Li Keqiang during his first term.
但也可能反映我们中央财政在物质装备支持方面还有不足。 还需要加大力度，但这绝不意味着经济形势不好。党校的负责同志一直希望我来讲一讲经济形势和应对举措。
Of course, he knew that reform was not easy during this process, so when he was the Prime Minister for the first time, he said a famous phrase that is well known to everyone, saying that touching interests is even harder than touching the soul. He knows the reform entered a deep water zone due to huge interest patterns and massive interest adjustments. In early China, during development, decentralization and benefit sharing led to incremental reform, with relatively small resistance to reform. But it's different when you enter the deep water area, involving adjusting interests like healthcare reform. Everyone knows about healthcare reform. China has different medical insurance systems, including one for national cadres. There are employees and migrants. In theory, all citizens of China should have an equal social security system. But the reform process needs significant adjustments to interests. Are government officials willing to sympathize with migrant workers? Definitely not. But they are also the creators of reform policies, so the resistance must be strong. Li Keqiang's touching interest is harder than touching the soul refers to this. However, Li Keqiang's economic development in the past 10 years has been good, but there is little to show in terms of mechanism reform and institutional reform. Especially when he entered his term and was then met with the pandemic, let alone reforms, everyone knows that Xi Jinping has reversed the gears. Particularly by the second term, it's clear as day that Xi Jinping wants to serve again, which is now a secret known to all. Li Keqiang sees it in his eyes, and he must also feel it in his heart. He can't stop all this, so in the last couple of years before stepping down, Li Keqiang mentioned it frequently.
中国开放还要继续往前推进，黄河、长江不会倒流，盐田港的水也是会滔滔不绝，而且不仅要继续保持你们的优势，还要扩大你们的优势。我明确地告诉大家，无论国际风云如何变幻，中国都会坚定不移地扩大开放。长江、黄河不会倒流，中国对外开放40多年了，发展了自己，造福了人民，也有利于世界。这是个机遇的大门，我们绝不会，也绝不能把它关上。
But at this time, when he was talking about this information, I think he is no longer a so-called policy, but what? It is a so-called appeal. He believes that although the Yangtze River and the Yellow River will not reverse their flow, reform is possible. Don't assume reform won't backtrack. He stated our reform and opening up discussions won't cease, but it's merely his expectation. Yeah.
刚才习近平主席 签署了中华人民共和国主席令，现在宣布，根据全国人民代表大会的决定，任命李强同志为中华人民共和国国务院总理。
By the way, when I was preparing for this episode, I was thinking about a question. If a decade ago, when Xi Jinping and Li Keqiang were competing for the position of General Secretary of the selection system of the Chinese Communist Party ultimately chose Li Keqiang instead of Xi Jinping, what would have happened then? How would the past decade have turned out? And what about the upcoming decade? Party of China. Li Keqiang may not have been as capable as Xi Jinping, and he may not have been as decisive and ambitious. But Li Keqiang, in my opinion, has a few points. First, he may continue to adhere to the path of reform and opening up, and continue to prioritize economic development because most previous officials have followed this path. Secondly, he will definitely not break the term system for leading cadres because he neither has the ability nor the ambition. So I was thinking, for a big country like China, what quality is the most important for selecting the top leader? Is your ability and ambition the most important, or is it more important to follow the rules and regulations and not mess around? Everyone knows that the phrase "no fuss" was coined during Hu Jintao's tenure. When the phrase "no fuss" was mentioned, many foreign journalists didn't know how to translate it. Many of us also said at the time, this phrase sounds a bit unrefined, not quite something a leader of a party and nation would say. But many years later, when we look back at Hu Jintao's "no fuss," don't we find these words truly precious? As a leader, it's best not to mess around. Follow the path of reform and opening up that has already been formed, and move forward in an orderly manner. You'd better not have such strong abilities, you'd better not have such high ambitions. So in my opinion, actually someone like Li Keqiang, if he really becomes the highest leader of the Chinese Communist Party, it might actually be a good thing for this country. But regardless, Li Keqiang, aged 68, died suddenly, which can also be seen as a symbol from a certain perspective. This symbol also signifies that after 40 years of reform and opening up, the system established by the CYLC to select and recommend top leaders has come to a complete and definitive end. But for the CCP, is this a good thing or a bad thing? That's all for today. Thank you, everyone.
人在干，天在看，看来是苍天有眼啊！看着我们国办同志这些年来 辛辛苦苦、扎扎实实做出的特殊的奉献，应该给你们奖赏。看这个风已经呼风了。
我明确地告诉大家，无论国际风云如何变幻，中国都会坚定不移地扩大开放。长江黄河不会倒流，中国对外开放40多年了，发展了自己，造福了人民，也有利于世界。这是个机遇的大门，